And we're going to be hearing from a highly sought after and world-renowned food consultant, food business consultant who has over 20 years experience in the luxury foods retail industry and has experience working for the likes of Harvey Nichols, Harrods and Selfridges, just to name a few. So kindly welcome to the stage, Mr. Scott Winston.
Thanks very much. Thank you first and foremost to GTBank to inviting me out here to talk to all of you people. I suppose, anyone in the audience here around earlier to watch Lorraine's demonstration? Yes, no? Yeah? And how about Sonny's as well? Okay, well, they're really tough acts to follow, primarily because they gave you lots of food to look at and eat and enjoy and get all excited about. And I can't do that because I'm not a cook, I'm not a chef. I have a kind of a slightly lazy job where I get to take what people have produced and I get to try and make it profitable and put it into shops so it can really, really shine. But even having said that, there are things that resonated with me and my job and my career when I listened to Lorraine and I listened to Sonny. You know, Lorraine talked about passion, and she talked about how she'd trained and really, really gone after a goal. And so did Sonny as well. I mean, she had so much energy. She talked about taking risks, about stopping a career and starting again. And many of the food producers that I work with now, they're in a similar situation. Maybe similar to people in the audience out here who have stopped what they're doing and are taking a risk and are trying something new. And I'm I look at these people with awe. They inspire me every day, just like Sunny did when she's talking about stopping her career and having no money and starting again. But I suppose before we get into the journey of what it takes to create a successful food brand, I'd love just to tell you a little bit about me, because I think it's important that you understand and have a little bit of faith that this guy standing in front of you knows a tiny bit of what he's talking about and has maybe gone through some experiences that might be able to help you if you've got a food brand. I left school kind of not really having a career or a focus. My father was a butcher all his life. He worked with me. I remember Sunny telling us about her grandparents, and they owned pig farms, and I really thought of that then. And my father said, just come and do a job, just sell something, work with me. And from that, I developed a love of food. I found out what it meant. And as well as a love of food, a love of working with customers and working with people. And this is a passion that stayed with me my entire life. I thought if I found something that I really enjoy doing, then I really, really want to go after that. So I started selling food in a London shop called Harvey Nichols, and I eventually made my way up, being very persistent, to the role of buyer there, where I was looking after the food selection for all of the food hall. I then got approached to go and work for another London store called Harrods, where I started category buying there in certain areas, and moved around and bought every single category within that store over about a 10-year period. And that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I then was asked again to move and go and work for another very prestigious London store called Selfridges. Went and moved there and did some work there as well. So that's my basis. That took me up to about 20 years worth of experience working in the food industry. And then I realized that it just still wasn't enough, that I wanted to help small food producers. I wanted to try and find a way to use the experience I'd had creating ranges and creating products for some of those stores, take that and be able to help small producers who weren't well funded, who didn't have immense resources. Maybe I could help them with some of the experiences that I had. And that's what I set about doing about 2 years ago. And thankfully, it's worked really, really well. I've worked with maybe 30 new food startups over that period. And I've been able to partner with them and launch them into stores in London, And now we're seeing them spread to the UK and to the rest of the world as well, with some international launches, which is really exciting. But first and foremost, are there any people in the room that have got food businesses or aspire to create their own food brand? Yeah? Got a few. That's amazing. That's fantastic. Thought this is never going to work if everyone's expecting me to cook something, because that's not going to happen. So that's good. So on that basis, we're going to talk about the idea, how important that food idea is. The fact that it must translate, it must scale, it must do some things. It's not just good enough to be a great idea. It needs to be able to move, and it needs to be able to move and scale. We're going to talk about building the brand. We're going to talk about some steps. And we're going to talk something I call the brand journey. So this is the stages in a brand's life, right from inception right through to the point where it's really, really working very, very hard for us. We're going to talk about scaling the business. I'm going to talk about how we talk to buyers, how you get buyers in department stores or in shops, people who you rely on to buy your product from you and offer it to their customers. What are they looking for? What are their motives? How can you appeal to them? And finally, we're going to talk about supporting your product once it's launched, because really, that's just the start of the journey. Also, I really, really want this to be interactive. I really want to invite questions from you guys as we go. So I think we'll go for a little kind of packet of information, maybe starting with the idea. And then if anyone's got any questions that might be applicable to their business, to their experience, let's see if we can answer some questions and make it interactive. So starting with that first theme, thinking about the idea, really we have to ask ourselves, what is it and who is it for? You might have an amazing food product that all your friends tell you is fantastic, but does that mean that enough people are going to love it as well, that you're going to be able to sell it and make money from it? We all have passion. Everyone that I've seen today, Lorraine, Sonny, everyone here is hugely passionate about food. But if we're in the food business, then there should be some emphasis on that second word, business. We have to make sure that it's sustainable, that it's viable, and it's profitable, as well as being a passion project. So what is that idea? And if we sit down and look at it objectively, is it really, really going to work as we start to invest our time and energy into it to make it into a brand? And that comes on to the next kind of point within that. We need to validate the idea. We need to maybe spread it around, share it with as many people as we can to make sure that they agree that, yeah, it's a really good idea. It's something that can really, really work. We then need to start to think about how we're going to take that idea, just those first thoughts of starting to think about how do we make it a product. If it's a recipe, if it's something you're making at home, how is that going to scale exactly? How are you going to make it in a factory or a commercial kitchen? Does it work? Is it economic to do so? It might be the most amazing jar of jam in the world, but if the selling price is really, really expensive, that's going to really narrow its appeal. So we have to focus on that at these very early stages, because if we continue to invest money and energy into ideas that are too expensive to produce, then the outcome's not going to be good. We also need to start thinking at this point about a really robust business plan. I have a mantra which I've used with many of my clients, which is plan, do, review. This means having that plan, actioning it, but crucially making sure that we're going back and checking our performance against that. Were the outcomes as we expected? And if they're not, do we need to modify our plan? Do we need to change our direction a little bit in order to make sure that the business is still going to be successful? And to that point, we need to be flexible, and we need to accept that feedback and be able to modify our business plan in order to make sure that it is viable. So is there anyone in the room? Are there any questions from people that have got an idea at the minute, and they're interested about how they maybe take that idea and move it up a notch and turn it into something that might sell? Gentleman over there. Right there.
Good day. I have a question regarding the idea concern. How do you go about, once you begin to bounce the idea off people, there's a risk of disclosure, people taking up your idea. How do you balance that against the need to get information?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And actually it comes up a little bit later on when people are looking at funding and looking to get money for their food business, and they're worried about sharing that information. And I think what you have to understand is you have to start to deal with people that you trust initially. You have to meet them and be aware of who they are. You need a certain element of trust in that. But I think a lot of people, as you start to share ideas, if they're the right kind of people for you to be talking to at that time, it's your idea, it's your passion. Certainly from a funding point of view, the people with money, they don't want to have the hassle maybe of producing something, but they want your idea. So normally there's naturally a good synergy there. And I've had to convince probably 5 or 6 people that I work with to get to that funding stage and to go to things like crowdfunding or making their idea public. Of course, you need to have a bit of care around that, because if you're doing something very unique and then you share it with someone who might have the capability or the capacity to get it to market first, then you might suffer from that. So yeah, you need to share the idea, check in with people that you trust, but also a little bit of diligence around that just to make sure that someone isn't going to take it and steal it. But in my experience, it doesn't happen, because whatever you create, if it's very unique and special, people won't have that secret or the extra part to copy it and do it in the way that you do. Is there anyone else with an idea at that sort of stage? Got a few hands going up, which is great.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. I currently developed a product. It's a tea-based product.
Okay.
Around here we call it Zobo drink. What you would call hibiscus.
Okay.
Hibiscus juice.
Yeah,
but then I have it as tea, brewed as tea. So and when I developed the product, I was actually targeting the export market. So what are the regulatory hitches that I stand to face going into exports?
Okay, and what's your...
the UK market?
So the UK specifically, so we look at the EU legislative at the minute.
Great.
Might change in a year or so, but at the minute we're looking at EU. The honest answer is I don't know, but you raise a very valid point. You've got a plan and you're fulfilling that criteria, and actually you're very specific about what you want to do with that product because you see an opportunity in export. So part of that validation process for that initial stage is to do this homework and to really check to see what the legislation is. I don't know. I've always looked at exporting tea and kind of doing it the other way around. So I don't have that knowledge from you, specifically from Africa as well. But I think the fact that you're aware that there might be some legislative issues is good enough at this stage. And now you need to push through. Just on tea as well, it's a very busy marketplace. It's one of those categories where there's an awful lot of product. So something we're going to talk about at the minute is that unique selling point. So making sure that your product is very unique and very attractive, and that will allow it to work maybe a little bit harder and a little bit easier. Any other questions on that stage? Lady there.
Hello,
Hi.
Scott. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Now, let me ask you a question because it's all about making money here, right? Now, do you concentrate on basic food or luxurious food? Like, you're English, aren't you? And the national food in England is chips and fish, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Now, if you're going to make money, because you have to understand Nigeria is a third world country and we have food insecurity here. So, do I specialize in going to the basic food or the luxurious food to make money? Because the luxurious food is a small cliche, and the basic food, everybody eats food every day.
So what we've seen, certainly in the UK, and I think to an extent globally, so the question, sorry, was about which maybe segment of the market should you focus on? Should it be luxury and high-end, or should it be maybe a more basic level? And there's food insecurity is a problem around the world, and we are very much aware of it in the UK. And the answer is that either of those can make money and can be profitable. And what we talk about in the food industry in the UK a little bit is polarization. And that means those two extremes are getting wider. So the ability to make money, to profit from having a food business which specializes in quite a basic food entity, maybe what we might class as a commodity, that's certainly there because there are families and there are people there that don't have lots and lots and lots of money to spend on food. But equally, there's an opportunity to make money in high-end food, in luxury food. And what we're seeing is that people want to treat themselves. So of course the volume of a luxury food that you sell will be a lot lower. But by definition, the price that you charge and the price that you might need to make it goes up. So it can still be a profitable business. So I guess my honest answer is that I've worked with brands who are working on quite basic foodstuffs, I suppose, and also brands that are working on foods which are appealing to the high end, to the luxury market, and both can be profitable. So we'll move on a little bit. Once we've got that idea, once we've checked around, we've got some validation, we need to start building a brand. We need to take a product, a recipe, an idea, and we need to turn it into a brand. So we need to do a bit more kind of robust validation around this. We need to make sure that it's really, really going to work. So we might want to go into shops and see what they're selling already. We might want to check on competitive pricing. And we'll come back to that point when the gentleman was talking about hibiscus tea. We need to make sure that our brand now has a very strong, unique selling point, that when it goes on shelf, that it's really going to talk to the customer. And that's something that you really need to think about when you're starting to build your brand. Again, we need to think about the competition. Who else is working in that space? How much are they charging to buy a similar product? Is ours better value? Should it be more money or should it be lower? Who's the customer? And maybe start to target retailers and stores who appeal to that customer, to that end user, so that you can make sure that your product's in the right environment to appeal to the right customer. We talked a little bit about funding, but certainly you might want to look at the funding that you will need and in various stages. So we talk about maybe looking at starting your business and just having a small amount of money to get you going, and then go back and doing more funding. Crowdfunding has become incredibly popular in the UK now, and I'm not sure if it even exists out here, but it's certainly proved very, very popular. What crowdfunding also does is it helps to gain attention for your brand. A lot of businesses crowdfund when they don't actually need a lot of money. But what they're doing is they're getting their brand kind of FaceTime in front of an interested demographic of people. So that's incredibly important. Lastly, we need to start to think about developing our brand identity. The food product that we might have could be the best in the world, but we can have some things that support that as well. So we need to make sure that the packaging, if it needs it, is just right, and that the branding and that the identity really talk about that product and appeal to the customer that we're talking to. So we look at steps of scaling, and if we're retailing our product, I very often describe it like a bit of a pyramid. So at the top of the pyramid, you might have some smaller independent stores. They might be local to where you live or work, so it's easy for you to deliver. The assumption is that you're making this product yourself and then delivering to those stores. And they can start to help you get that feedback, get that validation. And they can also be influential in kind of allowing the story of your product to spread and become bigger. So smaller independent retailers that often have higher levels of credibility, they can work very, very hard for you at those early days in spreading the word about your new brand. So they're incredibly important to work with. As we go down that pyramid, we get to a mid-stage where the retailers are bigger, they're more powerful. They might have 4 or 5 or 6 stores. So your distribution becomes higher. You might start to need to talk to distribution partners that can help you. You might need to start to look at co-packing or finding a factory. And these are all things that come with that middle stage. What you tend to lose is a little bit of influence. Those stores, if they're in certain areas, aren't as influential. The bottom of the pyramid is mass market distribution. And again, your needs will change. You'll definitely need very organized distribution. You'll definitely need a manufacturing partner unless you're investing in your own factory yourself. And then finally, as well, we might consider export. And of course, as we start to scale our business in this way, there are lots of other factors that start to come to our mind. We might look at more sophisticated marketing. So I'm just curious, is there anyone in the room that's got a food business that's kind of at that stage where it's looking to grow and scale and it's already out there a little bit and got some validation? Yeah? We get Mike? Thanks. Hi.
Yeah. I run a food business, and at the beginning it was tough, but right now it's still tough because we are at the stage where we're already in the market, but the issue is the customers we have are friends and family.
Yeah.
Then some other people that comes in, we kind of build a relationship with them. They're also family. But the challenge we've been having is we rely on these friends and family to refer us, but they are just reluctant, and even though they know the food is very good, and we have different payment plan, most of them pay at the end of the month, like they stick with us, they are very faithful. But they have issue with referring us to people outside. They are just indifferent, and we've been having issues. Then going to offices, we noticed that most people we've been chatting with, they can't afford our food. So they want something they can get like 100, 200, which will not work for us because of the effort and everything we put in it. And it's been kind of very frustrating, to be candid.
I have a food producer that I work with in the UK, and we describe her business a bit like a very naughty child. So when it was very little, it was very naughty and needed to be controlled. And as it got older, it was fine, and now it's a teenager and it's very naughty again and it's misbehaving. And I think you're more like you've done really, really well. You've got a business that's working, but it's misbehaving a little bit. I think from the two things that you asked really about wider distribution, and then maybe we can also look at pricing and why there's some resistance to that and how you might be able to overcome that a little bit. First off, you've probably really got to do some, and you've probably already done this, but you've got to get out there. You've got to find some new shops. You've got to give them products. You've got to get in front of the people in those stores. If it's the guy behind the counter doing the ordering, you've got to try and engage with him. I work with a really interesting, really energetic guy in the UK. And he signed his little food business, it was really small, to a fairly major distribution company in London. So this company had little vans going out every single day all over London, and he would turn up at the warehouse every single morning. He'd get in a van. When the guy was making a delivery, he'd jump out and he'd give the shop owner like 2 bottles. He had as long as it took that driver to make his delivery to do his pitch, and then he had to get back in the van and go to the next one. He did that for 6 months, and now he's got an international business. You have to try and get out there and try and engage with those new shops. That's the first thing, and I'm sure you're doing that. The second thing around price, if you're getting some of that feedback that there's resistance, then you really need to look at your food business and say to yourself seriously, is it going to scale? Is it going to reach that point where people who aren't your friends and family and who know you are going to buy it? But there's things you can do. Some things we look at in businesses that I work with are maybe reviewing the pack size, if that's possible. I don't know what food product it is. But sometimes, you've got a price for 500 gram product. If you can sell 200 gram or 100 gram, then the customer might buy into that product. Or can you make a trial size version of it so they can try it, take it home, understand the great quality of the food that you're producing, and then buy into the larger size? That's one route. The second is maybe value engineering. So looking at the cost of the ingredients, really being ruthless with writing that down. How much money do you need to make? I've worked with more than one food brand where they don't make any money from the product they sell in the first year. So they've said to themselves, we're going to commit to this, we have a little bit of funding we can put in, so we won't make any money. But what we're doing is we're seeding the product into the marketplace. We're encouraging people to try the product. And as we start to scale naturally, laws of economy will dictate that maybe they'll be able to purchase cheaper, so they'll start to make some money. And they've built that into their business plan as quite a robust way of trying to kickstart their business and get it going. Yeah. Anyone else with a similar sort of question? Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Please, I want you to advise me concerning branding. At what point do I take the risk of branding a shop or a kiosk to advertise my business? Though my business is going on fine, the pricing is okay, the quantity, just like you said, I'm trying to make sure the profit is as little as possible. So people are really attracted to it. But now I want to take it a step further to brand a kiosk or brand a shop. At what point do you think it's the right time for me to take that risk or like a bigger step, or should I still wait and get more customers?
I suppose it's interesting to understand why you think that branding is so important. A lot of people do a lot of things in the food industry because it's a heart decision, or because they think they need to be doing something. I'd stick to a really robust business plan, and if an element of your business plan tells you we will definitely attract more customers if we're branded in a certain way, then I'd invest your time, your energy, and your cash in doing that. If not, and just because some guy down the street brands his store in a certain way, it doesn't mean that you have to or should do, unless it's a threat to your business. Don't spend money unnecessarily, you know? Hi.
Hello. I'm new. Okay. Okay, I'm new as a brand, but I've been in the food business for a while. I want to ask, my idea of food business is fine dining. That's when you have to come in, order, and wait for your food. But in Nigeria, I realize that people are not patient to wait for your food, for someone to start cooking before you can eat. So should I stick to what I'm used to and wait for the process to pull through, or just move with what is going on?
So this is a question, very often you can break stuff down, just like the previous point about managing risk. And if I go back to my buyer days, what we used to say is, if we've got a range performing really, really well, then we might change 10% of that range, because that's risky. For that range is working well, why would we change it to an unknown quantity and be unsure about how it's going to perform? So I think everyone needs to kind of grow their businesses and look at ways that they can diversify. But my advice to you would be to see if you can split just some of your time to invest in that new idea, to see if you can make it work. But don't sacrifice all of your current business in order to get there. You need to be able to manage risk. And you need to be able to say yourself, what is an acceptable risk level for me? If I really see profit from changing my direction 100% and doing something new, and you're happy with that level of risk, then do it, indeed. But if there's any doubt in your mind, and it feels like there might be, then I'd recommend trying to, I never want to condone doing loads of things at once, certainly badly, but maybe try and spend a little bit of time investing in that whilst maintaining your current business. Okay, so before we do a few more questions, I just wanted to talk to you guys about talking to the buyer, talking to people that you need to talk to in order to get stuff done. And some of this we've already covered off, but I think there are a few really key things that you need to think about when you're engaging with people that are going to buy your products. First of all, it's really understand your market and make sure that you're fully aware of what's going on in that market, where the dynamism is, where the movement is. Look at the organization that you want to deal with in depth. Part of your business plan will be around identifying shops that you really want to work with. So make sure that they are a good fit for your business and that you understand that organization. You then need to understand what the buyer's motives are in these shops and make sure that you're talking to them. So if we are working at the more, I guess, basic end of the market, they are going to be incredibly price sensitive. So you need to come and talk to them with a competitive offer. If they're working at the opposite end of the market in maybe more luxurious or specialist foods, then they're interested in the uniqueness of your food, in the taste and the quality, but they're not going to be so price sensitive. If you go to the buyer and you're offering them something that would appeal to them, because if it's a luxury food, you're talking about quality and you're talking about uniqueness, then they're going to be far more engaged with you and willing to listen to you. If you go to that value supermarket buyer with a product range which is cheap and basic and is doing a job and performing really well but at a basic level, then they're going to want to talk to you as well. And then the last layer of that is to really, really understand the customer that walks in that shop and make sure that your product is truly appealing to them. So the last little section I'm going to talk about is supporting your product once it has launched. This is based on the assumption that you have a great idea that it's just about to launch. So many brands I've seen, they think that it's good enough just to get that delivery into a shop and then stop and not do anything else. You really have to support your product once it's there. Any typical grocery shop in London might have maybe 2,000 products. So how do you make sure that yours is the one that's getting all the attention? Yours is the one that's capturing the customer's attention. And what's crucial to do that is to make sure that you're going into those stores, that you're training the staff on your product, that you're giving the staff in those shop samplers so that they can try the food and understand how good it is. And then finally making sure that you're happy with where it is on shelf, that you feed back to the buyer if you come in and you've agreed it's going to be on the 4th shelf and it's way down below, then you need to feed that back to the buyer. And then you can only really do all this effectively if you're going into the shop on a regular basis and checking on what's going on.